The smell. It was always the smell that gave him away first. A pungent mix of high-octane gasoline, salty sweat, and the dry smoke of a Lucky Strike cigarette burning down to the tip, ignored in a makeshift ashtray. It was San Francisco, 1968. The steep, winding streets of Rushing Hill trembled, not from an earthquake, but from the orchestrated fury of a Ford Mustang 390 GT and a black Dodge Charger. Behind the wheel was not a stuntman, but the man himself, the actor America already called the King of Cool, Steve McQueen. His eyes, a steel blue that reflected the imminent danger, focused on the road, but his mind was miles away, trapped in a cage he had built himself. He hated that brown tweed suit, he hated the pretense of Hollywood, he hated the orders of director Peter Yates, but he loved speed. He loved the feeling of the V8 engine roaring like an caged predator under the hood, a sound that muffled the old voices in his head, the voices of abandonment. The Mustang leapt over a hill, and for a fleeting instant the entire car floated, suspended against the gray California sky. That moment of zero gravity was the only peace McQueen knew. It wasn't acting, it was catharsis. The world saw him as the epitome of calm, controlled masculinity, but beneath the leather jacket and the casual pose, a volcano of rage, paranoia, and the deep scar of a childhood that had marked him forever boiled. He was a celebrity who hated being a star, a millionaire who never trusted fortune, and a man who only felt alive when he was on the verge of death. To understand the icon, one must unmask the orphan. Terrence Stephen McQueen was born in 1930, an accident, the son of an alcoholic mother and a circus acrobat father who disappeared 6 months later. Misery was his first language. At the age of 3, he was abandoned by his mother, Julian, and sent to his maternal grandparents on a ranch in Slater, Missouri. This period was the only glimpse of stability, permeated by the smell of earth and hay, the comforting warmth of a simple life that, ironically, he would spend the rest of his life trying to recreate while simultaneously running away from it. But the peace was short-lived. At 8, Julian took him back to Indianapolis. The mother was a volatile shadow, incapable of consistent love. Young Steve was thrown into an abusive stepfather's care. The scars weren't just emotional. He ran away repeatedly, slept on the streets, stole for food, and with every beating, every rejection, the cold steel of distrust was forged in his soul. He wasn't just surviving, he was learning to fight the entire world. At 14, after being caught stealing hubcaps and aimlessly wandering, his exhausted mother declared him incorrigible. The decision was made. McQueen was sent to Boys Republic, a farming reform school for troubled youths in Chino Hills, California. There, amidst the iron discipline and manual labor under the scorching sun, McQueen found for the first time a structure not based on chaos. He hated authority, but respected the brutal honesty of the place. It was there that his rage began to be channeled, not cured, but transformed into a tool. He would later claim that Boys Republic saved his life. This was the crucible where his famous air of detachment and resilience solidified. He graduated at 16 and plunged headfirst into life, merchant sailor, lumberjack, street vendor, anything that kept him moving and away from the walls that threatened to suffocate him. The transition to acting, beginning in New York in the early 50s, was for him just another form of survival, a way to monetize his explosive temper. He walked into auditions with the residual smell of motor oil and fresh asphalt, a stark contrast to the polished actor's studio hopefuls. He studied under Lee Strasberg, but the discipline of the method didn't suit his pace. He was raw, instinctive. The camera liked him not because he acted, but because he was the danger. His first significant taste of success came on television as the bounty hunter Josh Randall in the series Wanted, Dead or Alive, 1958. Suddenly, the street kid, the vagabond, was receiving thousands of fan letters. But fame brought discomfort. He viewed success as a dirty Hollywood game, and his defiant attitude was legendary. On sets, he demanded more money, more control over his wardrobe, which was, in fact, his own clothing, and frequently rewrote lines so they sounded more authentic, more McQueen. The definitive turning point came with The Magnificent Seven, 1960. Amidst established stars like Yul Brynner, McQueen used camera tricks and subtle movements, tilting his hat, unnecessarily dramatically reloading his rifle to divert attention, stealing scenes without saying a word. He wasn't acting against the bandits, he was competing against his cast. But it was The Great Escape, 1963, that turned him into a global phenomenon. Captain Virgil Hiltz, the Cooler King, personified McQueen's stoic rebellion. The final motorcycle chase scene, jumping fences and tearing up dirt, sealed his status. Although the most famous stunt was executed by a friend, Bud Eakins, the public believed it was Steve. And frankly, McQueen ensured they believed it. He insisted on riding as much as possible, feeling the German sun dry the sweat on his back, the wind whistling in his ears. That film didn't sell tickets, it sold the legend of Steve McQueen, the man who was never caught, the eternal fugitive. From that moment, he began to exert absolute control over his image and fortune. He knew his value lay in his authenticity and his refusal to be docile. His contract for Bullitt gave him not only an astronomical salary, but also a percentage of the profits and the right to keep the suits he wore. He wasn't just an actor, he was a brand, and he managed that brand with the cold precision of a financial calculator. The money began to accumulate dizzyingly, and with it, the paranoia. McQueen didn't trust banks. He remembered being hungry too well. He bought land and cars, lots of cars. His collection wasn't just a hobby, it was a barrier, a vault of tangible assets that the world couldn't take away. His garage was a personal museum of speed, racing Porsches, Ferraris, and, above all, motorcycles. With every new machine he bought, he felt the confirmation that the homeless kid from Indianapolis would never feel cold or hungry again. He smelled the new leather of the seats, felt the coolness of the polished metal. It was the smell of victory. The 70s were the height of his power. Films like Papillon, 1973, where his performance of physical and psychological endurance was almost literal, solidified his position as the highest-paid actor in the world. He was notoriously difficult on sets. He demanded that his co-stars, like Dustin Hoffman in Papillon, do the same number of takes as he did, regardless of whether they were acting better. He needed control because the chaos of his childhood had taught him that control was the only form of survival. But this need for control extended beyond the studios and the garage. His personal life was a roller coaster of passion and destruction. His first marriage, to actress Neil Adams, was marked by mutual infidelities and violent jealousy. He was a tormented man who drank to drown the pain and used drugs to keep the edge sharp. Fame was a weight he couldn't put down, and he sought physical danger to feel justified. There was a constant fear beneath the facade of cool. McQueen was at the top when the madness of Charles Manson erupted in Hollywood. Sharon Tate and her friends were brutally murdered in a house McQueen knew. He later discovered that he himself was on Manson's target list. The paranoia heightened. He began carrying a gun in public and installed complex security systems in his Malibu home. The smell of the sea was no longer relaxing. It was the cold vastness reminding him how exposed he was, even with all his wealth. He was the fastest man in the movie world, but he couldn't outrun the shadow of fear. He tried to find refuge in various ways. He abandoned Hollywood for a time, dedicating himself entirely to off-road racing. The desert, with its fine dust and dry heat, became his sanctuary. He wore worn clothes, mixing with mechanics and amateur racers, rejoicing in the fact that no one asked him for an autograph while he fixed a flat tire under a scorching sun. There, the only things that mattered were the lap time and the integrity of the machine. The smell of grease and dirt was his perfume of truth. The money continued to accumulate, driven by his control over residuals and his profit participation. However, this wealth was guarded with an avarice that many found incomprehensible. He lived spartanly, despite his collection being worth millions. He used the fortune not for display, but as an impenetrable armor. It was the guarantee that, if the world abandoned him again, he would at least have the capacity to buy his own silence and security. In the mid-70s, the shine began to fade. His most recent films were less successful. His body, once the embodiment of relentless vitality, began to betray him. The constant smell of cigarettes and exposure to asbestos, likely from his time as a Marine and race car driver, finally took their toll. In 1978, he was diagnosed with mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer linked to asbestos. The news was met not with acceptance, but with a resigned fury. The man who challenged death on two wheels now had to confront an invisible disease that was devouring him from within. Fragility was unacceptable. He tried to hide the diagnosis, refusing conventional chemotherapy treatments that would have made him weak and visibly sick, destroying his image of invincibility. Desperate, he resorted to unproven methods, flying to an obscure clinic in Rosarito, Mexico. The environment was a shocking contrast to the luxury of Malibu: brightly painted walls, the sickly sweet smell of disinfectant mixed with the Pacific salt. There, he underwent a bizarre treatment involving calf cell injections, vitamins, and strict diets. That was the end of the line for the rebel, the final fight against the inevitable. No one could see him like this. He, the man who embodied indestructible strength, was now reduced to a thin, desperate patient. His last marriage to the model Barbara Minty was a moment of softness, a final attempt to find the peace his mother never gave him. But the disease advanced quickly. In November 1980, after surgery to remove tumors in Tijuana, Steve McQueen's heart stopped. He was 50 years old. The body of the king of cool, the immortal fugitive, finally succumbed. The news shocked the world, but for those who knew the man behind the image, death was just the logical conclusion of a life lived at maximum throttle. The fortune he had amassed, calculated in tens of millions of dollars in land, real estate, and the priceless collection of cars and motorcycles, remained a testament to his paranoia and his discipline. He used the money to buy freedom and anonymity, two things that fame had stolen from him. Steve McQueen left behind not only iconic films, but the enigma of a man who used his rage to propel himself to stardom, but who never allowed stardom to tame him. He was the embodiment of the American contradiction, the loner who needed an audience, the rebel who demanded control. The smell of gasoline and the distant sound of a roaring engine remain his true signature. He hated being a star, but his fury and fragility ensured that he was and would remain eternally unforgettable.